Welcome to the centennial edition of Sharing Sox, our broadcast number 100. I am Southside Sox duty geezer Leigh Allan. With me, my son, and for the last time for a while, West Coast correspondent Will, who will be in Chicago for the next few months, performing in the Cherry Orchard at the Goodman Theater. And with us for this big celebration of our 100th show, the boss, Brett Ballantini, to partake and try to improve the level of actual knowledge on the show.
We figured this was a great opportunity to get fired in front of our audience. This is just, we wanted to bring on Brett to just end it painfully in front of everybody. We're gluttons for punishment because we're White Sox fans. Thrilled to have you here, though, Brett. Welcome.
Ratings are flagging this offseason. So, yes, this is our big blockbuster must-see event. Sharing Sox, no more, believe it or not. No, I did want to just jump in and try to be theatrical in front of the theater folks, just to throw down some stats about Sharing Sox. It is the 100th episode. Last episode, 99, was the 350th we've done as a whole, like Southside Sox group.
Wow.
So your milestones are just falling left and right. Really, none of the other podcasts. We've had 15 other podcasts sort of under the umbrella of Southside Sox. None really, aside from maybe the farm podcast we do, which really sort of still official Southside Sox business, have even gotten past like the mid-20s. So the fact that you guys have done what you've done, quality product, now 100 times, it does take some wherewithal. I mean, okay, all right, it's father and son. I mean, what, you're not gonna hide from each other, I suppose, although I mean, it's happened before. But I mean, so you have consistent casting, this all works out pretty well. You've had the most guests. I mean, really outside, maybe not even outside of, but at least outside of the Mothership podcast, you certainly had the biggest round of people coming in, even though it's been mostly just you two for a while. And I did look up, I'm not sure if Lee wrote this or not, the first podcast, September 9th, 2020, in the excitement of that 2020 season. Fathers and sons don't always agree on things, but when the father indoctrinates the son from birth, White Sox fandom becomes an area of definite agreement, or else. Leigh and Will Allan present a cross-generational look at baseball and the White Sox, past and present. They even have similar assessments. Well, mostly. That was the copy that kicked off the first podcast. And then you guys launched right into, I threw out that weird assignment where it's like, hey guys, you're not doing anything. Just do a pregame podcast for all the playoff games. Mercifully, the White Sox bowed out quickly, but you guys did that and even brought in a bunch of guests for that right off the bat. So really from the start, it's been a unique podcast for us. And I appreciate you guys doing it. That consistency along with, allows us to sort of say we have like a family of podcasts where we have actually people beyond just me forcing people to do it, doing these podcasts, and it makes for a lot of fun. And I know, I think there are people who are bigger fans of the Sharing Sox show than anything else we put out on there. I don't know if they're all just fathers and sons, listening together or something, but definitely it's been a popular podcast. And I appreciate you guys for just having the wherewithal to keep doing it, because it's been a lot of fun to see, I don't know if evolve is the right word, given how the White Sox have gone since you started. Maybe it's your fault.
Hey, we're
way to
still
go, guys.
Yeah,
the podcast.
The interesting thing is I made him a White Sox fan and he still talks to me.
It's getting dicier by the day.
Yeah,
it's normally a generational thing, but
on that point, if anyone out there is listening, I'm being held hostage to do this podcast. Please call your local authorities.
Hey,
Thanks,
here's a question I have. Not that we're going to just make this family hour per se, but my dad became a White Sox fan because of Chico Carrasquel. So I can trace my White Sox fandom to Chico, even though, of course, he was long away from baseball by the time I ever came around to watch around Southside Hitmen time. Is there a similar connection in terms of the forcing or the encouraging that Lee did to you, Will, in terms of a player or a season?
Actually do. I mean, he was pretty much just like, we're a White Sox family. My cutest baby picture is of me fully in a Cubs uniform, so I think that's what set me down the other path.
That's his mother's brother's fault.
Saw that picture and I thought, that's not me. That's not who I'm going to be in this world. So that's what did it. But honestly, for me, and that's a really good question, I am a very small guy. I am a second baseman by trade. Craig Biggio was, a huge hero of mine. So I grew up kind of on the Astros side of things as well, but way more White Sox because of Ray Durham.
Ray Durham. Oh, one of my favorites as well.
He was my guy, little second baseman, hustled harder than anybody on the field, played with some attitude, but was, not a bad guy, like definitely fundamental baseball player. I probably remember him even more fondly than he played. But I definitely, Ray Durham was an easy sell for me as a kid growing up as a White Sox fan. Did you use any special negotiation tactics, Dad, when you were making me?
No, it was just you were smaller than I was, so it worked out.
That always
I actually
works.
didn't become a White Sox fan until I moved to Chicago. I got out of the Navy in 1971, moved to Chicago, and 71. Your White Sox history was down at the bottom, and they had lost their 50,000-watt radio station. They're on this tiny little station in Evanston, and a group of dozens of other stations across the Midwest and into Pennsylvania, where Chuck Tanner was from. And in 1972, I went to work for the head station of the White Sox network. And that was really what got me into it. And 72 was the Chuck Tanner year, and Dick Allan, who was still, I would say, the best hitter I have ever seen. Just unbelievable. And I also was a middle infielder, so it's not natural that a first baseman would be my go-to guy. The other one, and I'm at least until lately a fairly thin person, Wilbur Wood was my
I gotta say, Dad, the first thing I gotta do is just compliment you. Being a White Sox fan from the start, making it through World War I, making it through World War II, you saw some really down years on this team. Like, we think it's bad now, but you saw some really bad White Sox teams, in the 20s, 30s.
I saw some really bad White Sox teams after I became a fan. They were really good up until about I did. I mean, through the 50s and 60s, they were very, very good.
I think what sealed it for me, though, you did indoctrinate me, of course. I'm thrilled that that's pretty much the only thing you indoctrinated me about. So I came out easy, but I do remember as a kid at the old Comiskey, before it was gone, we went to a game and I got to run the bases, and you guys sprung the $10 for the I ran the bases at Comiskey Park shirt with the little cartoon guy running the bases. And I think that's what sealed it for me forever. I just remember being a little kid, and I do remember they made you start at first base and not home, which I was not thrilled about. I wanted the full home run trot, but that's okay. And then I remember getting out there, and because I'm a little kid, running as hard as I possibly could, ending the greatest moment of my life as quickly as possible, because I just wanted to fly out there. I'm sure it looked like I had a piano on my back, but I was flying around those bases, and I think that's what sealed it for me. I've been on some of the major league fields since then, but I haven't gotten to run the bases since then, and that did the deal. Seeing Ray Durham and Frank Thomas in person, and then getting to run on the field that they were playing on, that was if you're talking 90s baseball, kid, how does it get better? It doesn't.
We should admit, Brett, there was one time, and this is going to bring us up to the present day, unfortunately, but there was a time, the late 90s, when we actually considered dumping the White Sox. Not because what happened, they weren't a good team. They were an adequate team, but not a good team all through here. It was when they signed Albert Bell. Because at that time, I don't know if you'll recall, but Frank Thomas was going through his really whiny period.
Yep.
So you had Big Frank whining like crazy, and they bring in Albert Bell, the biggest jerk in baseball at the time. And our opinion was, look, it's one thing to root for a team that's not much good, but one that's also a bunch of jerks. Let's find another team. And we scouted. There wasn't really online to do at the time, but we did whatever we could as far as gathering information on other teams and thinking about what city would we like. We actually lived at the time in Kentucky, where Will was born, and we were in Reds territory, but we just couldn't become Reds fans.
We liked them. We liked them. That was a good Reds team. Barry Larkin,
anti-Reds, but they still had that lingering, big red machine, and he just can go over to that.
And Riverfront Stadium was
go to watch ball games.
Yeah, it was.
And there happened to be an expansion team called the Tampa Bay Rays. We thought, we're better to go than Tampa, which you live around Tampa, right?
Yep, that's my closest ballpark. Yep.
All right. So we went down. We got airplane tickets. We got a hotel and went for a weekend of 4 games of the Rays hosting the Yankees, which incidentally is where we learned. And of course, it was almost all Yankees fans because the Yankees had been doing spring training there forever.
Mm-hmm.
And they were incredibly obnoxious, just unbelievably obnoxious human beings, which they could be because the Yankees beat them 4 straight times. So we thought maybe an expansion team is what we're looking for. Let's give the Sox another year. It turns out going over to the Rays wouldn't have been bad in the long term. But,
that Rays team,
you would have got a couple World Series.
That Rays team was actually pretty interesting too, with Wade Boggs and Fred McGriff. And I remember at the time I was trying.
I believe the second baseman was Miguel Cairo.
Miguel Cairo was at second base. Quentin McCracken was the star outfielder who kind of didn't really come to be, but was fairly exciting for a while there. But yeah, of all the 6,000 fans that were at those games, 5,998 were Yankees fans.
Yep.
And then my dad and I were in our, my newly purchased Devil Rays at the time, actually. I probably could have gone that route if they had kept the Devil Rays, because that was a cool name. But once they switched to just Rays, I was out on them for good.
That fan ratio still exists today. And Ozzy's last stop was with the Rays.
Right, yeah.
And just continuing the housekeeping, Albert Bell signed also as a middle finger to baseball because Jerry was upset that they actually stopped the lockout. You remember? So he's like, okay, I'll show you guys. And then finally, I'm going to say, Will, I'm a little older than you. Here's how we used to have to run the bases before Reinsdorf and Einhorn came around and things got just a little bit more sanitized at Comiskey Park. It's wait around, somehow not get kicked out by the anti-frame after a game, then with nobody there, run onto the field where there are no bases, just the spikes, and run the bases. That's my baseball at Comiskey Park running the bases experience.
I mean,
did slide into
pretty
home.
Cool.
Yeah, and then by the time the anti-frame, noticed, we'd already crossed the bases, and somebody had picked a piece of grass, and they said they were going to grow it back, at home, and grow Comiskey Park turf, and then we got shuttled out of there. But that was my running the bases.
You got to slide though. You got to walk out of there with the dirt all over the front of your shirt. You must have felt so cool.
It was like a packed game where I went with my friend and his dad, and it was like coat day or something. So a billion people showed up. I guess we had general admission because we couldn't get any seats together. So we watched that game. We watched Ralph Garr that game in the picnic area in the outfield, just watched through the fence all game because we couldn't sit anywhere. So we were sort of owed that that sneaking into the dugout to look at the tobacco and then running the bases because, listen, we did not get our $3 money worth for that game.
Albert Bell, I think the Albert Bell takes us to present day because jerks comes to mind for some reason. Today.
Hold on, before we even get into this, I just want to reflect on something about this podcast as we're wrapping up. I did my digging, and I could find at least 7 occasions in which I said Dylan Cease was going to become the best pitcher on the Chicago White Sox, and you said I was out of my mind.
Uh-oh.
At least 7. I actually think it happened in like the first 30 episodes. Was
That
me saying,
probably did.
I got a feeling about this guy. I got a feeling about this guy. And you saying, no, get rid of him. He's the worst. And me saying, I think if we just hold on, I think we got him. And I know, Dylan, you're still listening to every episode, which is really cool of you, by the way. That is my one, I think, hot take that I stuck with on this podcast that actually paid off. I think most of my hot takes have been just that. They've been scorching to the point where no one could hold them long enough for them to come to fruition. But before we got into our actual baseball talk today, I did need to gloat about being an absolute genius.
I don't believe that in your gloating, though, you pointed out that what's going to happen is he's going to get his head straightened out so that when one little tiny thing goes bad, he doesn't fall completely apart. Which is what happened last year and was terrific.
Nope. There are actual instances of me saying that's exactly what he needs to fix. You are so wrong. On multiple occasions, I was like, you can see the anxiety in him. And once he gets his head wrapped around that, he's going to be great. And what happened? I don't know.
You did talk. I will confess, I have much memory of you pointing out it's the way you can see the way his left toe points when he is in his.
I mean, that was mechanic stuff, and he fixed that, and boy, did he fix it.
But that was mentally too, because it would happen if you got a bad call or a single dropped in that somebody should have caught, which God knows happens with the White Sox all the time. That he would get so upset that all of a sudden his left toe was going off at an angle, and
he threw everything higher outside after that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, guys, before baseball, let me take the podcast over once more. I'm going to do this like 20 more times. You know what? I've never been a guest on any of these podcasts. This is the first time anyone's ever asked me in 350 podcasts to be on a podcast. So thank you. I'm really flattered. You sort of had to.
Oh, man, we blew it. We made a mistake.
Very nice. Yeah, thanks for breaking the streak there. But I think it's worth saying, not that listeners or viewers and readers don't know, but both of these guys, as much fun as they have on the podcast, and as funny as they are, Will in particular has written a number of, I mean, I would say the percentage of what he's written for the site is almost always funny and entertaining in that way, whereas Leigh mixes it up, including what is on the site most recently from one of you two, and I imagine we'll get into that a little bit because that's much more of a harder, grittier, sadder piece. But both of these guys aren't just our entertaining podcast and the cute novelty of father son. There's funny stuff, but also some of that analysis. As I'm listening, I think, well, wait, I'm just here to be entertained. I want to laugh and I want to agree with a take or grumble with Leigh because I don't agree or with Will. But actually, Will in particular, that's one that's great that's been brought out. The analysis here from both of you is from your breadth of fandom and actually playing and observing. Will in particular, a lot of stuff has jumped out at me in terms of options, and maybe sometimes those hot takes can be really hot and flat. But no, in terms of both of you guys, that's something I want to say it's unexpected, but given that we come out first sort of with the entertaining aspect of it and what you've both brought to the site in terms of the humor, you might think, okay, well, that's all we're going to get, and that isn't the case with this podcast or with your writing, and I appreciate that as well. Just needs to be said. I'll try not to host any longer.
Yeah, well, it's very, very kind of you. But let's get away from entertainment.
You bring up a really good point, though. You bring up a really good point, though, Brett, that a lot of the stuff I've written for the site is it seems funny, but it's really actually quite analytical. My piece about the biggest beefcakes on the White Sox certainly really struck a chord with some people. It got the message boards going. I was apparently off on the beefcakiness of some of these guys. a lot. Lance Lynn's a lot more beefcakey than I thought people were going to think, and sure enough, he became prime beefcake that year. But yeah, let's talk some. We're here. Let's talk some baseball.
All right, this should be an occasion other than the 100th and our goofing around nostalgia and whatnot. This should be an occasion of great celebration. We just. Pitchers and catchers have reported. The rest of the teams due in by Monday. It's back again. Baseball's back. Wow! And having invented the phrase "elephant in the room," which everybody in journalism used in the last 2 days, there's an elephant in the room. Olivia Feinstead today is supposed to meet again that's the accuser in the Mike Clevinger case, meet again with Major League Baseball, the investigators, which she said she's done 7 times. Did either of you happen to listen to her interview on the Score? They put it online. I know you're not in Chicago, but they put it online. It's a 20-some minute interview that they did. And she did not come across as a crazy person. She didn't come across as a mean person. She came across as a young lady who was very, very nervous to be on the radio talking about this, which is perfectly natural. And she spoke highly of, like I said, of Major League Baseball's investigators, but she said she knows they're not the ones who make a decision. She had nothing to say bad about the Padres or the White Sox. All she was asking really was that Clevinger have to go through treatment, especially drug treatment. She said he's almost constantly on acid or mushrooms, which are apparently extremely hard to detect. That he have to go through other, anger management, etc. That he not be allowed visitation without somebody else there. She wanted her mother present when he visited with their infant daughter, and that she get her stuff back, which is not unique to her. The other woman who has 2 of his children, it was locked out of the house with the children and couldn't get her stuff too. So everything, and I listened to the guys on the Score, the 2 who were interviewing her later, and they're going, this is pretty credible. Now, we don't know if she's telling the truth or not. We don't know if she lies. We know that Mike Clevinger is a liar. We know he's an incredibly dishonest human being. We know that from previous incidents with him. We know that with dealings with Trevor Bauer, and we of course know it for the COVID stuff with Cleveland. And we know he's poisoned in the clubhouse because we talked about this on an earlier episode. If he was a guy that his teammates liked, they would not have said he goes or we go in 2020 after he pulled his stunt of breaking COVID rules and then lying about it, being on the plane with 2 people with cancer, his manager and a player. They had to hate him before that. And yet the White Sox somehow miss all of this. It is so incredible that Rick Hahn is employed, but he misses all of this. And science, there was so much on Clevinger forgetting that before Olivia Feinstein went public, which wasn't until January on Instagram. It's unbelievable that they signed this guy. Somebody said one of the players, the players are saying things like, well, he stood up and he talked to us, and that was a good thing for him to do. That's fine. They have to say that.
Yeah.
Somebody gave him a big welcoming hug. I'd like to know who the hell that was. I got to guess, but I'm not going to guess out loud. But I mean, this is what's there. And instead, poor Pedro Grifol. Here you become a manager after many, many years of wanting to be a manager, and here's your day, and you're out there with your new team, and you're saying all the right things about we got to work harder and we got to get our defense, and you're paragraph 43. It's sad.
Well, the issue for the White Sox right now, and why I agree, I feel bad for obviously Olivia first and foremost, but also for guys like Grifol who came in wanting to change this culture and really seemed like they were going to. I mean, I've said on this podcast before, I was extremely impressed with Grifol's sort of onboarding and the way he was communicating with these young guys who had it seemed like fallen out of love with baseball under La Russa. A bunch of guys who were some of the most fun guys in all of baseball to watch in 2020. We slowly saw, as we mentioned, body language picking up on. We slowly saw that body language shift to, I don't really want to be here. And Grifol comes in. It seems like we are absolutely going to change that. And, we can't write off that that's not happening with these guys still. But to have this huge distraction and something that really the White Sox can do nothing about until we find out from MLB, which we know moves violently slow on these issues, just absurdly offensively slow. I don't know. I feel like we're going to be stuck with him for quite some time. And this distraction's going to go, it's at least going to go on through spring training, I think, and maybe into the season. I don't know what to expect from this whole situation. But yeah, this is a lot of noise for a jerk who was going to give us a 5 ERA if we were lucky. This signing perplexed me from day one. When they announced it as being a $7 or $8 million signing, I was confused. And then all of a sudden it was a $12 million signing. I was even more confused. This was just a classic White Sox mess up. All teams have jerks. All teams have jerks. That is just how sports work. You can't expect to have 26 guys in the dugout and they're all just great guys. These are egotistical people and have been raised to be so. But this is a guy that we knew so much about. And also, we knew probably wasn't going to make that big of a contribution to this team. So this signing is so a sign of Hahn being kind of out of touch with the game. I mean, he looks great in his puffer vests and his all-bird shoes when he does his press conferences. He's living well, but I just don't think this guy. I don't think Hahn's heart is in it with this team at all either. He just seems completely disinterested in the game of baseball, and that trickle-down effect from the top down. I mean, I think it will cause some problems for this team and for Pedro Grifol, who deserves better as well.
It's sort of a given, and I'll speak for all three of us here in just saying, first off, of course, we are getting into the minutia of something that involves a roster, and of course, as Will alluded, in the big scheme of things, the victim here is a woman and her child, and of course, it seems like several women, or we know for a fact at least one other. So I mean, we're discussing the small details of this in a greater context, where of course, we as White Sox fans, are by no means victims here. That said, and that established, and that being a given, if you're listening to this, I hope you do know that. Breaking down into the details, the thing that really jumped out at me, and you guys have already touched on stuff I would have said, is the deflection, which of course we expect from Rick Hahn, deflection to the point of he's now started to post La Russa, although he did have his Reggie's moment, post La Russa hiring, he's seemingly gotten angrier and being more willing to fan shame and point fingers and really maybe almost do anything desperately to hold on to his job. And we saw that in the opening pitchers and catchers press conferencing. And I think something among many things that really, really struck hollow, and I wouldn't expect anything else from Rick Hahn, is this deflection of, we can't do a thing we couldn't possibly know, which is just so bald-faced a lie. I understand as a lawyer you say that because you got coverage. Who can really say, well, of course MLB can't share details? Please, first of all, as you guys have both very eloquently expressed, all of this, anybody can roll out of bed and know this is not a guy to sign, whether off the field or on the field. You got both. And you really have to wonder what's going on here, besides the fact that the White Sox have zero pitching depth, so you got to get somebody. They jumped the market to get the guy, paid him, I guess, what turned out to be about market rate, given the fact we saw some pretty big numbers. Right, the money is less offensive than the whole Adam Eaton jump the market and get this biggest jerk out there on your team, get him in the fold and in the clubhouse. But this notion of, how could we possibly know? I understand why he lied to me is just so offensive. And I mean, the guy, every time he speaks in front of microphones at this point, is writing his resignation letter or his firing email. And yet it doesn't happen. And we know it's not going to.
Well, and he says, well, if I thought I was part of the problem at all, I'd fire myself or I'd resign. Well,
yeah.
I mean,
your ego you hear a lot. You hear a lot.
Incredibly big.
His self-scouting's as bad as his actual scouting as it turns out.
Yeah, you hear that kind of claim a lot in Washington, D.C., and you hate to hear it in Major League Baseball. You hate to hear a guy who says, if I thought I was part of the problem, I'd leave. Well, buddy, I know it's tough to assess ourselves, but come on, man.
And let me launch this out here, too,
because... seven-figure income. He lives in the town he was born and grew up in. His kids go to a school. Apparently his wife likes it here. He's unemployable just would not have another job at Major League Baseball, except unless it was a step down as an assistant or something. Absolutely. He's a Harvard educated lawyer. He's not going to be unemployed. But he's got it made, and so he just first of all fixes his lips firmly to Jerry Reinsdorf's posterior, and just goes along for the ride at this point.
I think, though, you do need to apologize, Dad, for making all the listeners picture Jerry Reinsdorf's rear at this moment. Because I know as soon as you said that, I was like, I wonder, ooh, that's not ideal.
One thing that's being debated somewhat on site and around, Twitter and baseball among fans. I mean, again, I would hope anyone with any sort of logic, any sort of heart, knows where to line up on this issue. But specifically, there's some debate about he's, they paid him this big contract, of course they have to let, first of all, they have to let him pay, and they're going to want him to, Jerry doesn't pay people to stay home. But, something didn't strike me until now. And I know all contracts can be structured differently. But even though contracts can be structured differently, guys don't get paid for spring training. Technically, he may not even begin this whole argument of like, oh my God, well, they're just wasting money if he's not playing. No, tell him to sit in the corner. Tell him, again, MLBP is their job is to defend all players, even the scummiest, but they are not going to come out publicly and say. They're going to come to some agreement with the White Sox where it's like, okay, we're gonna talk about an injury or no, while this is still
that's what I thought a trainer the first day. I first of all was sad that he was even in a White Sox uniform. I was hoping they were just in their civvies running the bases or something. Because that's the picture that's going to be in the end of this total jerk is a White Sox uniform instead of a Cleveland or San Diego uniform. But my feeling was first time he goes out and throws, a trainer comes running out in the field, says, "Did you hear that crack? I heard that crack. Come on, we got to go get an MRI here." Mm-hmm. And they have somebody else's MRI ready to show them. Say, look at that. Oh no, 60-day IL right now, 60-day.
And then when Mike complains about it, we would say, "Do you get why we lied to you, buddy? Do you get why we lied to you?"
Exactly.
You get it, right?
It's like the White Sox can only play. They're like playing this like clean. I mean, first of all, they're not clean, but they're playing this like clean game. No other teams, even the bad team, Kansas City Royals are playing in more gray area. It seems like with the White Sox than the White Sox are. And it's like, wait, there's flex with this team. I know Reinsdorf's power has at least diminished. He's certainly not the most powerful owner in baseball any longer, but it hasn't disappeared. He's not 30th on the power rankings either. The idea that the White Sox can't like get away with gray area stuff that teams routinely do. Not that I want my team to like cheat and play dirty, but the idea that you can't bend the rules in order to even cover your own mistake, like you just said, you get why we lied to you. What's a guy going to say? I mean, and we have this investigation that presumably is going to wind up. Maybe it's not going to conveniently wind up by opening day, but it is going to wind up to the point where it's like, okay, well, now this dovetails with either you're exonerated, right, or you're gone, and we and then we don't have to pay you.
There's that middle ground, which apparently what they call the administrative leave, which apparently MLB doesn't like to do unless there's new information. Well, an interesting thing here in that interview with Olivia Feinstead on the Score was when she went public, she said she was contacted by a number of other women when she went on Instagram showing her bruises and whatnot. She was contacted by a number of other women, including one who had apparently gone with Clevinger when she was in college and she said she's been in therapy for 8 years recovering from it. So, and she is meeting today, as said, with MLB. If she gives some names there, even if they don't have time to talk to them, that's new information. And if they have new information, they can do administrative leave by their own rules and by the union contract. So they could do that, get him the hell off the field while they determine what they're going to do. And in the end, I've been thinking for a while, what's the over and under on how many games he's got to get? They bet on everything now. Let's bet on the over and under. Yeah. I'm at 60, but I could go with 81 as the over under.
Yeah. I definitely think what you're saying is spot on. I mean, with her saying that a bunch of other women have come forward, these things just aren't made up. This dude is bad news. We now have many people who seem to have been affected by this guy in a horrible way. We can't reward this kind of crap. We just absolutely can't. This guy should be out of Major League Baseball. I know the commissioner's office also listens to every episode, and you guys need to listen to us right now. Figure it out. Fake it until you make it, until you can get rid of this guy, because we do not want him. White Sox fans do not want him. No matter what happens at this point with this investigation, I am in a mindset of, sorry, this dude is trash. He treats people like garbage. We do not want him on our baseball team. We don't need this guy.
If you have knowledge on this, in two of the recent cases, the most famous one, Trevor Bauer, who is, of course, Mike Clevinger's best buddy, and in the much lesser case of Starlin Castro, the teams did not let them go until the suspension was over. Do you know if that's part of the agreement or part of the rules, or is that just a decision made by the Dodgers on the Nationals? Because it's possible if they're suspended, you're not allowed to do anything with them, which would be include getting rid of them, and you can't fire them in essence until the suspension's over. I don't know if that's the case or not.
That's what we keep seeing, and I do think there's validity to that. But we're talking about this gray area, this middle ground. You've both acknowledged where it's like the new information, and not even to trivialize that, because clearly there is new information both today and even since like the newer Instagram posting. There's been continually legitimate new, but I mean the new information could be an additional drug that he was said to have used. I mean, if they want to, I mean, my MLB has every right to punish the White Sox if they choose to, in this sort of, like, I don't know, trivial is not the right word, but emotional way, for signing this scumbag in the first place. And again, jumping the market to get him. And if they sort of want the White Sox to dangle a little bit, I mean, I'm not really sure it's supposed to work that way, but if it was, hey, listen, the White Sox, they did make this bet. But the idea that
Bro Manfred has no reason to like Jerry Reinsdorf. He has a lot of reasons to dislike Jerry Reinsdorf, who tried to keep him from being commissioner, and was Sully's best friend, and who likes to throw his weight around, and probably has been trying to do it all along, including in negotiations in 21.
But I mean, bigger picture, MLB says, okay, do we want this guy active in our game in the same way they would not have wanted Trevor Bauer? Of course, there's the legal trappings of what the two sides do agree to, and they've just now agreed to for 6 years of harmony or whatever. Of course, you don't want to cross those lines, but the idea that, again, you can't massage that even for stuff far more trivial than what is really coming out undoubtedly today, and even has come out since the initial report. Well, since Olivia first spoke up, then what was public, and then what's more recently public. I mean, it's ludicrous that there isn't new information that would justify just telling Clevinger, if not even feigning the MRI or whatever, just sit for a week, sit until everybody else reports, sit until games begin, sit until March. There, you can make up stuff just to keep moving the goalposts.
I say the administrative leave is a valid thing for them to do. It's in the rules. It's in the contract. So, but the White Sox, this is the one thing where Rick Hahn is right. The White Sox cannot take unilateral action until MLB allows them to do so. They don't have to tell them to do so. They just have to allow them to do so. So we probably should get off this and get on to more happy things like baseball that kind of run this. But this is, as I've said 100 times, and everybody's copied the phrase, the elephant in the room. And it's, I mean, I'm interested to see if anybody buys tickets. I get my emails daily on what ticket package is available to me now. We are going to a game because Will's going to be in Chicago, but we bought tickets third party, did not pay any money for them. We are taking the red line. We are eating before the game. There will not be a nickel that goes into Jerry's pocket.
Not at all. And on that note, we will take our break. This is, for our listeners, you notice, an elongated episode for us. We're usually quite to the point with our brilliant observations. But today we decided we're gonna draw them out and put you through some extra pain today. But hang with us, and we will be right back on Sharing Sox. Welcome back to Sharing Sox. We reminisced about how awesome we are, and then we discussed how awesome Mike Clevinger is not. But let's talk about we got a baseball season coming up. With the Clevinger issues aside, hopefully they will be resolved in a way that means we don't get Mike Clevinger on our field ever. But let's talk about the guys who we do want to have on our field in
Gordon Beckham.
2023.
I want to bring up Gordon Beckham here.
Oh, great. That's always a good sign.
Yeah. See you guys.
Yeah. Bye, Brett. Thanks for coming.
Not because every year, as we all remember, Gordon Beckham would report to spring training and he would be in the best shape of his life every year. And by God, the White Sox are doing it. I mean, every player does it. This happens with every player in every team. Yohan Moncada's in the best shape of his life, and Lucas Giolito's in the best shape. And I mean, just go. Everybody so far has been in the best shape of his life. So that's opening of spring training in the good way because everybody's ready to go.
I mean, I will say I have seen a lot of videos of the guys putting in the work this offseason. I've seen a lot of Luis Robert looking fly, hitting some dingers. I've seen Moncada. I saw a video of them being like, look how good Moncada looks in the cage as he just routinely hits 70-mile-an-hour pitches. I don't know how that was supposed to impress me. I'm more concerned with when a big league pitcher throws the ball to you on Moncada. Let's go with a different kind of elephant in the room. We still don't have a second baseman. We still don't have a right fielder. This is probably becoming a theme on the Sharing Sox podcast of us addressing the lack of second baseman and the lack of right fielder. And now it looks like it's going to be Oscar Colas. Is that what we think on opening day? We're going to have
not even any contract manipulation. Probably they're that desperate. He's had 30 at bats in AAA, so why not? Oh, excuse me, 31. I don't want to underplay it. And then at second base, we have Romy Gonzalez, who has already proved that he's not a major leaguer. So we can go a couple of ways there.
Oscar may have to wait if the new rules for base stealers warrant Billy Hamilton stealing about 40 bags in Cactus League. He may get that right field job. I'm joking, but I do not see how Billy Hamilton can't steal getting any regular time, like 100 bases this year. But yeah, he's still not a regular, right fielder.
I mean, you bring up an interesting thing with Billy, because if there was anything that the Sox did right during the offseason, and they did, I mean, that's why they got an F, and that's why they score low, and that's why they're predicted to have.
You're scraping, Lee. You're scraping, but I want to hear what this is.
But if there's anything they did right, it was getting somehow minor league contracts early on with Billy Hamilton and Jake Marisnick, because Hamilton's incredibly fast. Jake's really fast too. And they're both defensive people, excellent defensive outfielders who can play center field. The prediction from the company shill, Scott Merkin, is that Victor Reyes will be outfielder number 4. I can't imagine why you wouldn't have somebody who can play center as outfielder number 4, because otherwise that puts Leary in center while he's also playing second. So he's going to be really tired.
I definitely am. I'm with you, Brett, on this one of the hopes that these new rules with base stealing gives Billy Hamilton a slight edge at making the club and being out there, because he is so fast that with these new rules, singles are doubles for him and walks are doubles for him. Like he is a guy who is going to be at an extreme advantage here in a really exciting way. I know there's a lot of griping about these rules. I also tend to gripe about changes in the game. It seems like we're constantly getting changes in the game, but when it can lead to something like stolen bases, which for me it's one of the more exciting aspects of the game is that moment when the guy takes off and the catcher's got to turn that ball around real quick. Billy Hamilton just became a very valuable guy to have on base. Now, the issue is whether or not they think Billy Hamilton can get to first base. But it's a huge upside now that if you have a guy who can get to first, who's going to get to second, probably 80-90% of the time.
Yeah, 90.
Yeah, I mean, with these new rules, it's 90 for Billy. And that is a crucial guy to have on a team that got beat out by more aggressive base running teams last year, I mean, you look at teams like Cleveland last year, who are always taking the extra base, who are stealing a lot of bases. I mean, that's who we could be. The White Sox, despite how we have some guys at the absolute bottom of Major League Baseball in terms of speed, in Vaughn and Grandal, there is actually quite a bit of speed on this team. We should see a lot more stolen bases from guys like Hamilton if they get to play. Luis Roberts' stolen bases should be going way up. Tim Anderson's stolen bases should be going way up. I would even probably see some more stolen bases from Yoan Moncada this year. It is just going to be an exciting new aspect of the game based on these rule changes. Marisnick, a good backup to have, I think. There was a time where I think Jake Marisnick was a valuable MLB starter. I don't know if he's quite that anymore, but we have options to get to Colas if our team is smart enough to use those options correctly. My big fear is we sit on Oscar Colas and Gavin Sheets plays right field in Major League Baseball this year, which honestly I would
hold it. No. Gavin would only be out there 5 times a week because they're insisting that Eloy's going to play in right field twice a week.
Right. Yes. The cannon of Eloy Jimenez out there in right field. Talk about stretching every single into a double. I mean, in our softball league out here, we have guys where I say, if you hit the ball to right, it's a double no matter what. You're always running. Well, I think if I was hitting the ball to Eloy in Major League Baseball, I would be thinking 2 right out of the box. Right.
It's a whole other net to have to master. That's going to take half a season alone.
Yeah, true.
Put in right field.
He's not familiar with that net. We know he likes to get cozy with the net. He likes to learn it. He likes to feel it out. And you're right. That's a big learning curve. That net is.
And we should point out here, because we're making a lot of fun of it. We both, and I'm sure you too, Brett, love Eloy Jimenez. Love him as a ball player and as a person. But we would prefer he never be seen in the outfield again.
Yeah, I do expect Eloy to have an absolute monster year at the plate. I think Pedro Grifol is the right guy for someone like Eloy Jimenez to get his heart back in the game, to get him smiling and laughing and get him back to the Eloy that we brought over to this team who clearly loves baseball. It was so disheartening to see him sort of lose that passion. I do think he is going to have an absolutely monster year batting. I just hope that he doesn't get hurt falling into the net in right field so we can take advantage of that bat.
18th anniversary grinder ball, guys. Grinder ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Second base, we've got Romy Gonzalez. Who is a person. So he's got that going for him. He is a guy who can stand out there and take up that space. Backing him up, we have the White Sox, the absolute fan favorite, Lurie Garcia, who somehow is just still around all the time. I mean, I love that we do have a guy we can say is our longest tenured White Sox. But I'm not sure this is the guy necessarily that you want to have that claim. Between Leori being the longest White Sox player and Andrew Benintendi being the highest paid ever, I think we have some very strange records that we need to have broken. And I'm not anti-Benintendi. I think he's an okay signing. I think he'll be solid in left field. But second base is a huge problem, especially now with that shift going away. The Keystone becomes a position that matters again. It used to be, over the last few years, it's been the guy who stands all the way out in right field when a left-handed batter's up and they hit the ball right to him. Well, second basemen need range again. And you need a decent glove at second base. You cannot hide a guy there anymore like you kind of have been able to the last couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the White Sox and our very uninteresting pool of possible second base candidates.
Well, yeah, that of course, the one person who's still out there unsigned, but the White Sox will not sign him is Elvis Andrus, which would make a huge difference in that situation. But they're not going to do anything with him. Let's look forward.
Okay.
We know the ratings F. The White Sox had an F from The Athletic for their offseason. Just a D minus, though, from ESPN. Generally considered the worst. The Athletic came out with a survey today of 29 former executives, coaches, and scouts, and it was all bad White Sox stuff. Who were the least improved teams in baseball? They weren't the least improved. Tigers and A's beat them, but of course they were both trying to get bad. White Sox came in third place with least improved. Okay, so you've got a team that has lost its best hitter by far, has lost its best defender by D-War in Josh Harrison, has lost its second best starting pitcher in Johnny Cueto, probably with no replacement for him, no replacement for the best defender either, maybe replacement at first base, but not as good, and also the best reliever, because that was nobody's fault. That's just very sad. But they've lost all of that, and in return, they've got new manager. I think probably the most important thing. They got Andrew Benintendi, which Will and I both agree is a good thing. We got some defense on left field, if nothing else, and he's a good player. And really, that's about it. And they're playing now, and of course, we're hoping. The hopes are all those injured players, they're not going to get hurt this year. They're hurt every year, but not this year. Robert and Anderson and Jimenez, they're not going to get hurt this year like they've been hurt every year for God knows how long. And then, yes, Mike Grandal. And we're going to count on bounce backs from Okada. I think there'll be some there. Bounce backs from Giolito. I expect that. I think that's going to be the biggest one. Bounce back from Grandal, I don't believe for 1 second is going to occur.
No way.
The league has figured out they don't have to be scared of Yasmani Grandal and walk him anymore. And he's just done. But a harder schedule, because you only get to pick on Detroit 13 times instead of 19 this year. The predictions coming out from Zips and Pacoda are ugly. Ugly losing record. I think one has a 74 wins and the other 76, and 10 or 11 games behind both the Guardians and the Twins. Predictions. And we'll do another set when we get up to the season. What's your prediction, Brett? What are we going to do?
Staff wise, I think 2 years in a row we've done this. This would be a third year staff wise, and I've been low picker both years. That was embarrassing.
I tied with you one time.
Yeah, it was embarrassing the year that I did not pick them for the playoffs and everyone else did. But it was less embarrassing when people were maybe upwards of 15, 16, 18 wins off last year. But yeah, it's hard, just taking it from the context where you just sort of set all this up, Lee, it's hard to see them coming back at 81 wins. They're not going to be a 500 team between the schedule, the fact that you're counting on a lot. I mean, is it possible? Is it possible for them to win the division? Is it possible for them to get into the upper 80s and take this division? Yes. That's an outlier. That's what? 10% maybe. This is a team that's going to struggle, it seems like, to get to 500. And if things have gone the way they've gone, it is going to be a lot closer to the Zips, I think was the lower one, like 74. It's going to be a lot closer to that 74, or I mean, maybe not even that. The idea that this is much more than in a 70s win team is just, you're silly if you think that. I mean, Lucas,
Las Vegas is saying 83.
Yeah, well,
that's kind of their line, but
yeah,
as we discussed
they can't spell Eloy. They called Eloy Jimenez Elroy Jimenez also, so they're not. I'm not giving them.
They also are not saying what they believe it will be. They are saying what they believe the middle of the betting will be.
Right.
And since we're by far the largest market in this division, they adjust for that. And they probably
there's some optimists out there.
Yeah. Well, as we had our betting specialist on here at one point, and he said, baseball's the game that bets more than any other sport at about 50-50. And I think giving the White Sox an 83 game season in Vegas is just a perfect example of, we don't know what they're going to do. We're pretty sure it's not going to be great.
Yeah.
And I think that's a comfortable place to be. I agree, Brett. I think that this could be a 90-win team if everything goes exactly how we are saying it has to go. I think if one guy doesn't have that bounce back that we've mentioned, it doesn't go that way. I was arguing with Rob Coletti, another Southside Soxer, who is very opinionated and thought I was
we all are.
Thought I was a fool for not thinking the White Sox would win 90 games this year. I don't know if that's the correct way to view my stance on this, but I'm certainly, he said like I'd take them for 90, and I was like, I'll take the under on that. You name the price, buddy. I'm not a betting man, as I've said on here, but I'm very comfortable taking the under on 90 wins. If Vegas gave us that right now, I'm in. But yeah, so many things have to change and go right. When you're saying things like, "Oh, we expect these bounce backs," there's no reason to expect these bounce backs. Like, there's no reason to think Moncada is going to come out and be in the best shape he's ever been in, even if they tell us. There's no reason to think Giolito is going to have fixed what was going on last year, especially if he's still lifting as heavily as he was, which we saw last year really messed up his form and hurt the changeup more than anything else, which is his pitch if he has a pitch. And that also depends on Lance Lynn.
There's no way. I'll take the under on Lance Lynn's number of starts. I think one place that I saw one of the predictions, maybe it was Zips, was predicting he'd have like 28, 29 starts. No, that is not going to happen unless he lost 75 pounds. He's going to make 20 starts.
And then as we mentioned before, I'm very concerned about these guys playing in the World Baseball Classic and not getting hurt. This is a team that struggled to keep guys on the field, and a lot of those guys are going out there to play highly competitive baseball sooner than they will be ready. Lance Lynn being one of them. I love the World Baseball Classic. I love when guys want to play for their home countries. I think they should. They deserve to get that opportunity. But Lance Lynn being on that White Sox or being on that USA pitching roster makes me very nervous for his health later in the season.
Let me calm you a little bit on that, Will, because the Team USA, not to say they're not playing with pride, but they seem to be approaching this a little bit. But just you look at the roster, seem to be approaching a little bit more like an NBA All-Star game. Now, all the other countries, they'll die for the Cuban players in there. Oh my God. Luis Robert might not make the start of the season based on how much they want it. The one saving grace, because you're right, everybody says, well, they're playing spring training anyway. No, this is different than spring training. Hopefully for most of those other teams, not that Team USA is going to like half-ass it, but I'm not really sure I'm guessing Lance Lynn says, I want to actually pitch in the major leagues this year. And I don't really have, as much as I want to wave the flag, I don't have to wave the flag and get the gold here. So I'm thinking the US, the team, the players on like Tim Anderson, I feel a little bit more comfortable with. The other guys, Moncada, he may not even make it to the South Side of Chicago this year based on how badly, these guys wanted and play for country pride. So hopefully Lance Lynn is not one of those great concerns.
Yeah. And these guys won't pitch as much in the World Baseball Classic, but if we lose Kendall Graveman and we have already lost Liam Hendriks for what for sure seems like this season, and hopefully he'll bounce back. If anyone can, it's Liam. But if we lose Kendall Graveman, that bullpen is looking really unattractive too. So again, I'm not as concerned with someone like Graveman, who's probably just going to pitch an inning here or there. Might end up actually being a good tune-up for someone like Graveman. Lance Lynn is my big question mark, because a lot of these projections for the White Sox that are positive, that are on the higher end, they're really banking on Lance Lynn coming out and eating up innings, which is what we got him for, and he hasn't really done. And as I gripe about more than anything on this podcast, we don't have any starters who have proved to us that they're going to throw 6 innings. I mean, when Dylan Cease did 7 last year, it was like we won the World Series. Everyone was like, "Do you believe that Dylan Cease threw 7 innings?" And I'm like, yeah, well, that was kind of what we expected from people.
And it's
great.
A large part of that. Well, obviously starters throw fewer innings for every team. It's just what the trend is. But a large part of that is we have the most inefficient starting staff in baseball. They throw more pitches per inning than any other team, if the starters do. That's what gets them. Now, if Grifol comes in and with Ethan Katz and they go, why don't we just throw strikes instead of taking every damn batter to 3-2? Let's see how that works this year. That would be very nice.
And it will be interesting to see how the pitch clock does change these things in baseball, because I've talked about this on the podcast before, but this style of baseball we've seen over the last few years where a pitcher throws the ball with everything they've got and then takes a spa day and then gets ready to throw again, which is just not what we watched when I hate to sound like the geezer on the Geezer Zone podcast, but when I was watching baseball growing up, back in the day, it didn't function that way. And you had just as great of pitchers as we have now who didn't take that time. It's going to be interesting to see if these guys actually end up going deeper into games because they can't blow out the arm on every pitch. A guy who's going to be really interesting to see, who's not on the White Sox, but is a White Sox guy in our hearts, Carlos Rodon. This is going to be something that really affects Carlos Rodon, who really takes his time between pitches to gather up that strength because he's got a nasty fastball, nasty slider. He's going to have to pitch a lot quicker, which means he's going to have to change his form. And we're going to see that from a lot of these White Sox guys as well, who have to turn the ball around a lot quicker. And I'm going to be interested to see if that means they're going to be willing to throw the ball in the zone a little bit more, or if they will go deeper into games because they're not blowing it all out in the first few innings. I actually think it's a really good thing. Timing aside, of course, I love the idea of Major League Baseball games being under 3 hours. But I also love the idea that it might get us back to a slightly more evenly matched pitcher-batter scenario when these guys...
We may have velocities go down. We probably will have velocities go down.
Velocity should go down this season based on that pitch clock. We should not see guys who are able to throw 98, 99 on every fastball attempt throughout their 4 starter innings. I'm really interested. I'm interested to see which guys find a new route to success. I think you're going to see a lot of guys who are studying people like Greg Maddux, like Mark Burley, these guys who were elite ball placers who worked very quickly. Tom Glavine, John Smoltz. I mean, I would be looking at that Braves group of starters from the 90s and see what they were doing. Those guys worked so fast, but were still so effective. And I hope our guys can pick up on that.
But realistically speaking to what Leigh said, and again, this goes back to my note about the analysis you guys sneak in between good jokes and setups and straight man routines. But pitch count has been a huge thing, in Leigh's mind, and he's brought it up many times. And for what Will is outlining with some hope to come into play would entail a coaching philosophy switch and players being able to adapt from being these more lunky, full effort guys to now suddenly on the fly in a season becoming really different pitchers. It's not to say it can't happen or it can't begin to happen, but the idea that they're all, of course they're not going to become Maddoxes, but even to adopt that, I'm guessing the game is going to tell them they have to do that rather than them being out ahead of it. As great as we all, think Ethan Katz is, et cetera, he's presided over some great successes and also some middling performance as well. So the jury may even still be out there, but the idea that he's going to be able to convince guys to change the way they're doing it, and the White Sox somehow philosophically as a team are going to be out ahead of this. I'm dubious. I mean, again, I don't
totally
want to rain
agree
on your sunshine.
No, I do totally agree. It is going to be something that they must learn as they go. They're not going to come out. As I was reading the ESPN article about the new rules, it said games are going to be won and lost on these pitch count penalties. And I think that is what is going to get guys to speed up. Is they're going to go out there, they're going to think, I'm still going to do my thing. And then they're going to learn, no, we're going to call this every time.
Mhm.
And if that starts to happen, these guys are going to have to adjust midseason. My other hope, my ray of sunshine about this, is that we see a lot of pitchers not have to go the Tommy John route. If they are not being able to put that much pressure on their arm on every pitch because they don't have that recovery time, I'm hoping we see guys looking for form that can keep them healthier so that they can move. Cardio, which is not something you often think of in baseball, becomes so crucial for pitchers with this new pitch clock. It's why in high school, the pitchers are just constantly running. They're constantly making you run because pitching is legs. Legs are the biggest muscle in the body. They require the most oxygen. That is what's going to give out first with this new pitching method of we got to go, we got to move, we got to pitch, we got to pitch. So I hope that with a new coaching staff and a new mentality that the White Sox are very cardio first this year. They clearly have not been in the past.
You know, I wonder, and I hadn't thought of this at all until just now. I wonder if younger pitchers will have an advantage this year because, and I mean guys just coming out of the minors, because the minors have had this.
Yeah.
Right.
They've had the pitch clock. So these guys are used to, guys have been around the majors for a while. They've never had, well, it's been there, but it really wasn't there. Some guys who've been pitching on these 20-second rules as they come up through the minor leagues, it shouldn't be a big difference to them at all.
Welcome to the rotation, Sean Burke and Davis Martin. We will need you, so it's good to have you because we will need you.
Yeah, that's an actual welcome because we will see you and we will need you to do well. But that's a really good point about the minor leaguers having practice with this a lot more than the major leaguers. And it's way easier to shape a minor leaguer to prepare for this than it is to shape a major leaguer who has had a great routine and thinks I'm going to go out there and do this again. On that note, we should start to wrap up the longest episode in the history of Sharing Sox. This has been awesome. Do you guys have any final takes before we must depart?
Well, baseball's back. That's that. Forget the elephant for the moment. Well, you can't forget an elephant, but nonetheless, push the hay bale over so the elephant can have it over there in the corner. And for the rest of it, let's have some baseball.
Congratulations, guys, on podcast 100, 101, and 102. This has been wonderful. Look, you got them all out of the way. You're getting closer to 200 now. So,
you can
congratulations.
You can just add it to be continued a few times in this one. I'm just going to piggyback on what the geezer said. You know, we as White Sox fans, we gripe about a lot. Some things are very deserving of our griping. Some things maybe not quite so much, but we love to gripe, so that's what we do. But the good thing is baseball is back, you guys. Baseball is back. I am so pumped. I got so antsy during football season. I can entertain myself a little bit with football. I can entertain myself a little bit with the NBA, with college basketball, but nothing compares to getting out to the ballpark and smelling those hot dogs and seeing that nice green grass until it gets ruined by Chicago weather. So game 2 or 3. But yeah, baseball's back. Let's give the team the love that we can until they make more wrong decisions that makes it so we can't love them anymore. But for the time being, let's hope that the White Sox and Major League Baseball take care of what needs to be taken care of and do the right thing here as people. And we will do the right thing and support the good guys in black and in white as they head out onto the field. So let's do it, you guys. Spring training, let's go. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on Sharing Sox.
How long did we go?